All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to the Bremerton Salvation Group here. Save our souls from the craziness going on in our lives in the world. I just started a class about a week ago on this title, Four Kinds of Mystics, Four Kinds of Mysticism. And what I want to do this morning is just kind of briefly describe what I mean by that, and then look at a specific idea of a kind of mystic. Most of us in the Western world have this idea that a mystic is someone who is enlightened, who has an experience of oneness with the divine, is in a place of bliss and joy and peace and harmony. And that's kind of the stereotype we have of a mystic. That's not wrong. That's where we're all headed, and that's what we all aspire to. And most of the mystics we like to listen to tell us about that experience. And most of us have had that experience of oneness, joy, peace, and calm. But what I'm going to suggest is that there are other kinds of mystics, and the idea we looked at a few weeks ago on soul making as stages of growth or stages of experience in life. There's four stages, if you recall. We begin this life as an ego, so there's the ego stage, and in that stage, it's all about me. And then as we grow, we move into tribal or relational stage, which is all about we. We start to develop relationships and expand our egos. And then a third stage is analytical or disintegration. We fall apart, just as in the fall, in the seasons, the things fall apart before they grow again. That's a stage of spiritual experience, is to fall apart. And then the fourth stage is mystic communal, which is the oneness. So what I'm suggesting is, just as there are the four stages, ego, relational or tribal, analytical, and the so-called mystical, all four of these stages I'm going to suggest are mystical. As I said, we have a stereotype, and I'm not going to go into the history of why we have this stereotype, but we have a stereotype that a mystic is a person who is always in a place of bliss and peace and wholeness. And a lot of us think we're not mystics because we're not always in a place of perfect peace and bliss and wholeness. What I want to suggest this morning is that all of life is a mystery, and the word mystic and mystery come from the same root. All of life is a mystery about the soul's unfolding, and the soul's unfolding must go through all four of those stages: selfish ego, tribal partisan relationships, analytical judgmental relationships, and then the mystical experience. So I want to talk about the more dark side of mysticism, the dark night of the soul, it's sometimes called. All the great, quote unquote, famous celebrity mystics, including more modern Eckhart Tolle, were always in a state of dark disintegration before the light came on. And I'm going to suggest that the states of darkness and disintegration are just as much of the mystery and the mystical as the experiences of light and joy and peace and calm. It's all mystical. This whole universe is a mystery, and every human being, whether they know it or not, are in the midst of a mystical experience. On one level, we might describe a mystic as someone who realizes that they're a mystic, rather than sitting around and waiting to become a mystic. I talk to so many people, and I myself have been in this place, where I'm just waiting for that day when I can have that mystical experience and finally arrive. And in that mindset, we're always waiting to arrive instead of recognizing that we're living in the mystical mystery in every moment. Now, this is especially pertinent to my wife and I right now. I was sharing with Cindy, and some of you may know or remember that we've been going through an ordeal here, or a situation, as my father is aging. He's 94, heart failure. He's moving into a kind of pre-dementia, where sometimes he's coherent, other times he's not. We've been with him pretty much 24/7. The last week, we have gotten about 2 hours of sleep a night because he calls us. My wife has been staying with him 24/7. He's threatened to kill both of us. He had guns in the house. I had to remove the guns from the house. It's been one of the most difficult experiences we've ever been through. I'm not sharing it for sympathy. I'm not sharing it for, oh, you poor guy. That's not the point. The point is, I'm seeing firsthand that what I'm talking about in this disintegration and darkness, the mystery of it and the mystical aspect of these dark experiences. Someone asked me the other day, how are you doing with this COVID-19 and the protests? And I said, I don't even think much about that, because we're in our own experience of darkness right now. And what's going on in the rest of the world is secondary to the crisis that we're in personally. So what I want to share in the next few minutes has to do not only with maybe personal crises you're going through right now, because I know some of you you're going through stuff, or the crises that you're paying attention to on the news. I don't have the luxury or the curse of having to listen to the news. I get about 10 minutes of news a day, which is too much. But there's all kinds of horrible stuff going on. So here's what I want to show: mysticism as the dark side. And I want to do it by asking this question: what do I mean by soul making? What's the mystery and the mysticism of soul making? So I'm going to put this on the screen and ask you to kind of go through it with me as we share together. To answer the question, or to look specifically at the answer to the question, what are the four kinds of mystic? And this is one kind of mystic, the soul-making mystic, who's in the middle of evolution through darkness and difficulty. I want to start with a quote from Ernest Holmes, the great New Thought teacher for Science of Mind. He said, the only way, now focus on that, it's pretty dogmatic, the only way God can evolve a spontaneous individual is to let him or her alone and allow his or her soul to awaken. And Holmes makes it clear that a lot of times that being left alone means being left in situations where we get to choose to go one way or the other in the midst of a difficult situation. That's soul making. That's the dark night of the soul of mysticism. I'm going to read some of these PowerPoint slides and then open it up to see if you all have questions. Put simply, a soul-making approach to life suggests that we come into this world not only as biological infants, but as psychological embryos, soul embryos. Each of us enters this world as an unformed soul seed. So what I mean here is, just as in biology, a sperm and an egg cell come together and begin to evolve a biological human being that grows in the womb and is born and then grows biologically in this world from infancy into toddler, adolescence, on into old age. I'm suggesting that it may also be possible that our souls come into this world as little tiny unformed seeds, that each of us is a little sperm cell, soul, that is an invisible sperm cell-like being that connects with the egg of this world, the embryo in the embryo of this cosmos, and that by connecting with this world and everything that goes on in it, including things like we're going through with my father, things you're going through, this quarantine, the protests and the world situations, that is part of the seed that each of us attaches to make a soul. It's a mystery. It's part of the mystical experience. 1948, the French philosopher Albert Camus wrote in his journal, "If there is a soul, it is a mistake to believe that it is given to us fully created." He's suggesting the soul is created here throughout a whole life, and living is nothing else but that long and painful bringing forth. Just as a mother brings forth a child through the pregnancy process, which sometimes can be quite difficult, and the birth experience difficult, I've heard. So the soul, birthing a soul, is often difficult, but like the birth of a child, there is joy at the end of the difficulty. A lot of the early Christian writers, and this is not known by a lot of people, a lot of the early Christian writers, some of you may or may not have heard of these people, probably the greatest early Christian theologian and spiritual ascetic or mystic, Origen, Irenaeus was another one. Both suggested that Adam and Eve, being made in God's image in the garden, remember the Garden of Eden where the soul seed is planted, they represent the birth of each human soul. And it is by living in this world that those little soul seeds transform and move into God's image. 1819, the poet John Keats, dying of tuberculosis, wrote a letter to his brother saying, "Call this world, this coronavirus world, this parents as they age, and we as we age, and all of the difficulties. Keats is saying, 25, dying of tuberculosis, call this world the valley of soul making, then you will find out the purpose of this world. That's a big statement. The purpose of this world, he suggested at the age of 25, as he was on his deathbed, is for making a soul. He said, each of us enters this school of soul making with particular lessons written on our hearts in order to become unique souls. In a soul making view, each person enters this world as a particular gender, into a specific geography, with assigned parents, siblings, a culture, our unique talents, our basic character, and basic life circumstances. All of these situations provide the curricula for crafting a unique psychospiritual being. Every one of our emotions, high and low, is part of our soul-making process. Let me read that again. Every emotion, this is a hard one for me to get my heart and mind around so many times. I do not see the emotions of being told at 2 o'clock in the morning by my father that he's going to kill me, and if he had a gun, he would. That emotion that goes with that does not feel very mystical. It doesn't feel very soulful. But from a soul-making perspective, in reflection, one gets to go through emotions, high and low, that create a soul that could never be created if everything were just always going smoothly. It reveals what's in the heart. Every emotion, high and low, is part of our soul-making process. Every conflicting idea and competing ideology, looking here at politics and religious views and all the things that we disagree about, every conflicting idea and every competing ideology provides classrooms and challenging assignments for the soul-making process. Every person we meet, our friends, our enemies, our lovers, our haters, are all teachers and fellow students in this school of soul-making. Any comments or questions? Anything come up? Take a pause here for a second. Anybody?
Not seeing anything yet, Michael, but I did put it out on both YouTube, and our Zoom participants know that they can type in or they can ask a question.
Well, Cindy, you flag me down if somebody says something, okay?
Will do.
All right. So I'm going to continue. From our first to our last breath in a soul-making view, that this whole life is mystical. Our whole life is mystical from the first breath to the last, whether we're awake or even dreaming our mystical experiences. Every passing moment, every tick of the clock conspires to make each of us into a one-of-a-kind soul. The Christian theologian Origen said it like this: each of us moves through this world, from the raw image of God into the finished likeness of God. That is mysticism. Soul-making requires many, many, many varied and contradictory experiences, ranging from delicious and destructive egoic self-obsessions all the way to lots or myriad healthy and unhealthy relationships. So every relationship in a soul-making perspective is cultivating that embryonic soul as it's moving and growing. There must be traumas as well as triumphs. We must be seized by and move through incessant sensations that range from elation to depression. The frantic mind and heart, and most all of us know that frantic mind that rests on the pillow at night when you're lying there and life is, passing out these situations that you just think, I don't know what to do. I don't see a way out of this. The frantic mind and heart are less like a computer, and this is what we hear a lot of times, garbage in, garbage out. There's some validity to that. The frantic mind is less like a nervous monkey. We hear monkey mind. And the frantic mind is more like the tides of an ocean. The tide rolls in, the tide rolls out. Worries come, panic comes, fear comes. It will roll out. Rising, moving in between, and then receding. And there is purpose in the mental and emotional churning, just as in the tides. The purpose of the tide keeps the ocean clean, keeps the beaches clean. So the high tide, the low tide, it's all working together for a purpose. Moments of crystal clear clarity, and thank God for those moments, and connection will be balanced by enigmatic mystery, and the enigmatic mysteries mingled with a chronic sense of alienation. I've had lots of those the last week, thinking, I don't know what to do. I feel left alone. I'm surrounded by people, even helpful people, but they can't solve this for me. One moment I might feel suicidal and suicidal despair, and the next moment I may sense some blissful, numinous presence around me in the midst of that despair. My fickle thoughts might tell me that this earthly existence is meaningless. This is the second paragraph here. Entirely random. And the next idea whispers that the entire cosmic adventure is fraught with purpose, fate, and destiny. It's not unusual in a soul-making mystical experience to go on the roller coaster from, I don't think there's any meaning in this life, this is all a bunch of nonsense, to there is such high purpose in this life. Each of these experiences is normal and necessary, providing me with a litany of contradictory self-reflective experiences from which to co-create a unique soul. In other words, this mind that goes from the high to the low, to life makes sense, to life doesn't make sense, is all part of the mystical soul-making experience. According to John Keats, the poet, the Bible, and various other sources, each of us is assigned peculiar private fantasies and obsessions. Do you know what I mean by that? Each of us has certain obsessions and fantasies and ideas and thoughts that we would not even dream of telling another person because we might be ashamed, or we don't know what they'll think about us. That's part of it. Each of us has some debilitating addiction in one form or another, maybe very serious or not so serious, but each of us has some kind of habit or addiction that is ours to handle in the mystical soul-making process. Puzzling erotic desires, secret shames, and quirky neuroses to go through. One person may experience a life of wealth and ease, and another poverty and constant challenges. Most of us in America fall somewhere in between these two extremes. These and many other experiences are all part of the complex and indescribable mystical soul-making process. Soul-making means that each of us feels compelled to do something. That is, the soul-making process, the mystical process, makes most of us wake up in the morning thinking, I need to do something today. I need to create something. I need to go make some money. I need to do something. And to become someone while in this world. It's not unusual for our initial youthful actions and ways to later be judged by ourselves as immature, errant, or sinful. Looking back in a soul-making process, often we'll say to ourselves, I wish I had done it differently. But they are always mystically instructive, moving us toward the next level of consciousness, preparing us to make different choices, to perform other deeds or misdeeds. This is how it works. It's also common to feel compelled by endless desires to find something more. Human beings always want something more. That's the mystical aspect of soul-making. To finally locate that special person or that perfect knowledge or that ideal thing that will ultimately satisfy me, only to be let down once we find it. This is how mystical soul-making works. It's not uncommon to feel like we are not alone in this world, that we're being nudged by some invisible hand. Soul-making acknowledges and requires such unseen co-participants. You can call them angels, whatever you want. The secularists call them genes and neurons, nurture, natural effects, but spiritual folks call them God, gods, angels, other names found in the world's religions and mythologies. If this mystical soul-making view of existence is true, then each of us in every moment is being molded into a unique individual. In my view, soul is always being made. Even when I'm saying to myself, there's no damn soul being made in this situation right now. It's being made. I am either aware or not aware of the process. Now, awareness increases conscious participation, provides a profound sense of purposefulness, especially in times of unimaginable suffering, that might be compared to a pregnant mother wearied by carrying the gestating embryo. In fact, this is how the Apostle Paul in the New Testament nearly 2,000 years ago wrote about soul making. Here's what he said 2,000 years ago as he wrote to a group of people in Rome. He said, "All around us we observe a pregnant creation. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs." Throughout the world, right now, everything that's going on. But it's not only around us, these birth pangs are within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We're also feeling the birth pangs. These sterile and barren bodies of ours, that is, these bodies that are getting old and wearing out, are yearning for full deliverance. That is why waiting does not diminish us any more than waiting diminishes a pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what is enlarging us, but the longer we wait, the larger we become, and the more joyful our expectancy. This is what the music this morning in our reading talked about. It's possible to carry that joy as a mother who is in the end stages of a pregnancy, has a joy knowing that the birth is coming. The joy doesn't come from the pain. The joy comes from knowing that the pain is bringing something that is new and alive. If you are curious about soul making, I'm at the end here, you might want to just Google the name John Keats, 1819, and his letter to his brother about soul making, and read that letter. Final slide. In these days of COVID-19 and the protests and people so divided about political and social issues, a soul-making perspective allows us to see personal, social, and global purpose in times of trouble. It doesn't diminish the trouble. It doesn't tell us to stop participating at whatever level you're participating. It just reminds us that every experience is a mystical experience, not just the mountaintop ahas and the feelings of bliss and peace, but even in the midst of trials, there is a kind of mysticism that takes place as the mystery comes to us through those soul-making experiences. So I've talked enough. I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has comments, questions, differences of opinion. It's a free forum.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'll unmute all on Zoom. I've posted on YouTube. There's usually a little bit of a delay there, but hopefully somebody will chime in with some questions for Michael.
I have a question and kind of a comment too,
Sure.
But going to your topic of soul making, I was thinking about it, and I've always thought of the soul as being my spirit, right? My spiritual nature.
Right.
And so in the context of your talk, is our spirit something different than our soul? Because I've thought, when you talk about soul making, I think about, well, that's what other people call the journey of awakening.
Yes, that is such a great question. So intuitive, because let me say there's two answers to your wonderful question. Is there a difference between soul and spirit? Number one, our conversation is the most important part of soul making, because just discussing this issue is soul making, which means that there's no single answer. These words are so limited, but I will give you my answer, but it's not the answer, okay? I take the best idea that I've gotten is from James Hillman in a little book called Revisioning Psychology, where he suggests, and I think this plays out in the literature, that that spirit is that aspect of us that wants to rise into the heights of wholeness. Soul is that aspect of us that descends into the depths of disintegration and darkness. And Hillman suggests that this culture is so fixated on wholeness and unity and putting everything together that we have conflated the two ideas, and we have turned soul into spirit, instead of seeing that in the greater literature, soul often refers to those aspects of descent into decay, disintegration, times of COVID-19, times of protests in the street, soul music, which is a unique thing that comes into the culture and sort of disrupts the typical pattern. So my answer is that both are necessary. And if you want to make soul and spirit the same, that's fine. That's valid. But I see them as like the yin yang symbol. I see one as yin and one as yang.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the great question. Anyone else? Anybody awake?
No, as always, Michael, you just give us so much to think about.
Yeah, I went through a lot there, and this forum to me is better than nothing, but I prefer the face-to-face so I can see your amazing glows.
Well, we all wish we were there too. Jamie, do you have something?
No, I'm just enjoying it.
Same
Yeah, I know
here.
we'd all like to be there in person and being able to share, but I think even when you've been in person, we're all just usually just so awestruck. We're like, gosh, I wish I had a really good question right now.
Yeah, well, that's why we need time to reflect, and even just to, ideally, and when I do the classes, we have more time so we can take some of these slides and look at them and let them sort of sink in, because most of us need time to kind of just ponder it and go, huh.
Yeah, I found for myself personally, especially this past week, there's been so much energy going on. You know, I mean, it was enough with the whole COVID thing, and then we had all of these just terribly emotional viewings of society just erupting. And yeah, I have to step away from the news. It just becomes so overwhelming that I just can't even handle it. And there's times where I found myself, gosh, I need to do something. I gotta fix something. I gotta be part of it. I've got to get involved. And then my other side going, no, we need to step back. We need to relax. We're getting overwhelmed. This is too much.
Yep.
You know, how do you know when you need to take action and when you need to step back?
Yep. And that's why I like the term soul making, because that question can be answered only by whom?
By ourselves.
By each person.
Yeah.
You know, I have some friends who tell me, you're not doing enough. You should be doing it like this. And my response is, you don't know what I need.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I guess we're ready. I see that.
I did have one thing to say.
Yep. Go ahead, Jamie.
This is Jamie. When you were talking, I was thinking more of rather than making a soul, discovering the soul.
That's another way of putting it. For me, soul making means doing your own thinking on this and your own terminology. So go for it.
Yeah, because all those experiences that we go through, to me, are used to discover the soul.
Yep, that's another good word.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you
Michael,
all.
thank you very much, Michael.
Michael.
As always, we enjoy it. And we will see you again very soon.